In the harsh laws of the savannah, being different is a death sentence. To be born white in a world of golden grass is to be born without camouflage, without a future, and often without a mother's love. This is the story of Casper. Born in 2019 with a rare genetic mutation that turned his coat as white as snow, he was viewed not as a miracle, but as a curse. His own pride, fearing his visibility would attract predators, abandoned him near the crocodile-infested waters of the Limpopo River. He was 3 months old. He should have died within 48 hours. But Casper didn't die. He learned to hunt in the daylight, where he couldn't hide. He learned to fight enemies 3 times his size because he had no pride to protect him. And 3 years later, a white shadow emerged from the bush, not as a victim, but as a 600-pound king. When he returned to the pride that rejected him, he didn't seek acceptance. He sought dominance. This is the story of the Ghost King. And if you think you know the brutal politics of the wild, you haven't seen anything yet. The tragedy began on a Tuesday morning under the relentless heat of the South African Lowveld. The Limpopo River, a lifeline cutting through the dust and thornbush, was the territory of the Marauder Pride, a coalition of 3 brothers and 7 females who held these lands with an iron grip. For weeks, the matriarch of the pride had been missing, hidden away in a dense thicket of fever trees. This is the way of the lioness. Birth is a vulnerable act, a moment where the queens of the savannah are reduced to fearful guardians, hiding their scent from the hyenas and leopards that constantly patrol the shadows. When she finally emerged, she brought out 3 cubs. 2 were tawny, their coats a perfect match for the dry winter grass, painted by nature to disappear into the landscape. But the 3rd was a glitch in the matrix. He was stark, blinding white, not an albino, but a carrier of leucism, a genetic roll of the dice that drained the pigment from his fur while leaving his eyes a piercing, deep gold. In a zoo, he would have been a priceless attraction. Here, in the unforgiving theater of the wild, he was a walking target. The reaction of the pride was immediate and chilling. Usually, when a mother introduces new cubs, there is a ritual of acceptance. The dominant males will sniff the offspring, a tense moment where they confirm paternity. If the cubs belong to a rival male, they are killed instantly. If they belong to the pride, they are greeted with rough licks and tolerance. But when the dominant male, a battle-scarred brute known as Titan, saw the white cub, he didn't lick him, he growled. A low, vibrating rumble that sent the rest of the pride scattering. To Titan, this white thing was not a sun, it was a beacon. In the dark of the night, a white lion reflects moonlight like a mirror. He would compromise the pride's hunting success. He would lead enemies back to the den. He was a strategic liability. The mother, sensing the hostility, tried to shield him. She nudged him behind her massive paws, her own growl warning the male to back off. For the first few weeks, maternal instinct won out. But the laws of survival are mathematical, not emotional. As the weeks turned into months, the drought worsened. The herds of impala and wildebeest moved further south, and the marauder pride began to starve. Hunger changes the personality of a pride. Tolerance evaporates. Patience dies. And the white cub, who the rangers had begun to call Casper for his ghostly appearance, became the scapegoat for their suffering. Because he couldn't hide, he ruined hunts. When the lionesses stalked through the tall grass, belly crawling within inches of a zebra herd, Casper's white coat stood out against the brown earth like a flare. The zebra would spot him, snort the alarm, and the herd would vanish in a cloud of dust. After the 5th failed hunt, the violence began. It wasn't the males who struck first, but his own siblings. Sensing the weakness, sensing that this brother was lesser, The tawny cubs began to bully him. They bit harder. They clawed deeper. While they slept in a pile of warmth, Casper was often pushed to the perimeter, shivering in the cold morning air. He was 3 months old, and he was already an outcast in his own family. But the breaking point came in late October. The pride had not eaten a significant meal in 6 days. Ribs were showing through their hides. The tension in the group was a physical weight, a wire pulled so tight it was ready to snap. The pride made a decision to move. They needed to cross the river and head toward the dense bush willow scrub where buffalo were rumored to be grazing. It was a 10-mile trek through hostile territory. They began to move at dusk. The pace was punishing. The adults moved with a desperate, hungry urgency. The tawny cubs, stronger and well-fed from the little milk the mother had left, kept up easily. Casper lagged behind. His legs were shorter. He was malnourished, his body burning more energy just to stay warm because he was always on the outside of the sleeping pile. He mewled, a high-pitched cry of distress that echoed dangerously in the twilight. Usually, a mother will stop. She will go back, pick up the straggler by the scruff of the neck, and carry him. The mother stopped. She looked back. She saw her white son stumbling over a fallen log, crying out for her. She looked at him. Then she looked at the 2 tawny cubs waiting by her side. She looked at the darkening horizon where the rest of the pride was disappearing. She had to make a choice. In the brutal arithmetic of the wild, energy is a currency you cannot overspend. Going back for the defective cub might cost her the energy she needed to hunt for the healthy ones. It might expose the healthy ones to the hyenas that were surely listening to Casper's cries. She hesitated. A singular, heartbreaking moment of indecision that seemed to stretch for an eternity. And then she turned away. She didn't run. She simply walked into the darkness, her tail twitching once before vanishing into the tall grass. Casper didn't understand. He ran after her, his small paws stirring up dust. He called out again, louder this time. "Wait, wait for me." But the grass swallowed them. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. He was alone. For the first time in his life, there was no heartbeat to sleep against, no rough tongue to clean the dust from his face, just the vast, empty cathedral of the night. And the night in Africa is never truly empty. As the sun fully set, the temperature plummeted. Casper curled himself into a tight ball at the base of a leadwood tree, trying to make himself small. But he couldn't turn off his color. In the moonlight, he glowed. Then came the sounds, the symphony of terror that governs the dark hours. The distant soaring of a leopard, the trumpet of an elephant disturbed at a waterhole, and then, much closer, the sound that freezes the blood of every living thing on the savannah. Whoop! 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 Hyenas. Not just one, a clan. The clan of the Broken Rock was known in this region. They were 60 strong, led by a matriarch massive enough to crush a buffalo's femur in her jaws. They were not just scavengers. They were hunters who specialized in killing lion cubs to eliminate future competition. They had heard Casper's cries. They had seen the white shape in the darkness. Casper heard the rustling in the grass before he saw them. He stood up, his tiny frame shaking, trying to summon a roar. But all that came out was a hiss, a pathetic sound against the encroaching nightmare. A pair of eyes reflected in the moonlight, then another, then 4 more. The hyenas emerged from the shadows, their shoulders hunched, their gaits uneven and eerie. They didn't attack immediately. Hyenas are intelligent. They savor the psychological torment. They circled him, their cackles rising into a maniacal laughter that echoed off the riverbanks. They knew he was alone. They knew there was no mother coming to save him. The lead hyena, a scarred female with a torn ear, stepped forward. She lowered her head, sniffing the air, smelling the fear radiating off the white cub. She licked her lips. Casper backed up until his fur pressed against the rough bark of the tree. He bared his milk teeth tiny, sharp needles that were his only weapon against a jaw pressure of 1,100 pounds per square inch. He was 3 months old. He was glowing white in the dark. He was surrounded by the eternal enemies of his kind. By all laws of nature, this was the end. But deep inside the genetic code of the cub, buried beneath the mutation that made him an outcast, was something else, something ancient. The blood of kings ran in his veins, even if his coat betrayed him. As the hyena lunged, jaws snapping for his neck, Casper didn't freeze. He didn't cower. He launched himself forward. The bite of a 3-month-old lion cub is not lethal. It lacks the crushing power to snap bone. But it possesses the needle-sharp desperation of a creature fighting for its only chance at existence. Casper didn't aim for the throat. He didn't know how to kill. He aimed for the closest thing he could reach, the sensitive, wet nose of the matriarch hyena. His canines sank into the soft cartilage. The matriarch yelped a sound of shock more than pain and jerked her massive head back. The force of the motion flung Casper into the air. He tumbled through the dust, landing hard on his side, winded, ribs aching. But he had bought himself a second. And in the wild, a second is the difference between a heartbeat and a carcass. Before the pack could swarm him, Casper scrambled, not away but up. Lions are poor climbers. Their bodies are built for power, not agility, but terror is a potent fuel. Digging his claws into the rough bark of the leadwood tree, he hauled his small white body up the trunk. He slipped, scrabbled, and finally pulled himself onto a V-shaped fork 12 feet off the ground, just as the matriarch's jaws snapped shut on the empty air where his tail had been a moment before. The hyenas circled the tree for hours. They paced, they whooped, they stared up at the glowing white orb in the branches with hungry yellow eyes. But as the first grey light of dawn touched the horizon, the ancient truce of the savannah took effect. Hyenas do not like to be caught in the open by day. The patrol of a dominant male lion could be deadly. Reluctantly, with one final chittering curse directed at the tree, the clan melted back into the shadows. Casper was alive, but he was trapped in a prison of his own making. He stayed in that tree for 2 days. Dehydration began to set in. His tongue felt like sandpaper. His stomach was a hollow pit of cramping pain. When he finally descended, his legs wobbled. He drank from a muddy puddle of elephant urine and rainwater. It was vile, but it was life. This marked the beginning of the ghost years. For the next 30 months, Casper disappeared from the known records of the park rangers. He became a rumor, a whisper around the campfires of safari guides. Some claimed to have seen a spirit lion drifting through the mist near the boundary fences. Others said it was a trick of the light. But Casper was real, and he was undergoing a transformation that defied biological logic. Without a pride to teach him, he had to rewrite the manual of being a lion. He couldn't rely on the coordinated flank attacks of the females. He couldn't rely on the brute force of a coalition. He had to become a scavenger first. He ate what others left behind. He bullied vultures off rotting impala carcasses. He dug for lizards. He ate insects. It was a humiliating existence for an apex predator, a king eating the scraps of peasants. But the protein fueled him. And as he grew, the very thing that was supposed to kill him, his white coat, began to evolve into a strange, psychological weapon. Casper discovered something about prey animals. They are hardwired to recognize the tawny shape of a lion in the grass. They scan for the camouflage. When they saw Casper, they didn't see a predator immediately. They saw an anomaly. A white shape in the bush is confusing. Is it a rock, a trick of light, a bleached skull? That moment of confusion, that hesitation, where an antelope stares for 2 seconds instead of running, became Casper's killing window. He stopped trying to hide. He began to hunt in the blazing heat of high noon. When other lions slept, he would walk openly toward a herd of wildebeest. They would stare, mesmerized by the white phantom walking through the shimmering heat waves. By the time they realized the phantom had teeth, he was already at full sprint. And his sprint was different. Because he had no brothers to help him bring down a 2,000-pound buffalo, Casper had to develop unnatural strength. A normal male lion relies on his weight to drag prey down. Casper learned to use torque. He learned to target the spine. He became a wrestler, a brawler who had to end fights quickly because he had no backup. By his 3rd birthday, the cub who had shivered in the tree was gone. In his place stood a monster. Rangers who finally captured him on a trail camera in late 2022 were stunned by the footage. He was colossal. Solitary males often grow larger because they don't share food, but Casper was a giant. His neck was a thick column of muscle, shielded by a mane that had darkened into a pale, dirty blonde, contrasting sharply with his white body. He carried scars mapwork across his flanks, souvenirs from warthog tusks and porcupine quills. But his eyes remained the same, deep, gold, intelligent. He was a ghost made of muscle and rage. And he was moving south, back toward the river, back toward the origin of his pain. While Casper was rising, the marauder pride his family was falling. Nature demands balance. The reign of Titan, Casper's father, had stretched for 8 years, an eternity for a coalition. But time is undefeated. Titan was old now. His teeth were worn down to yellow stumps. His 2 brothers had vanished, one killed by a cobra bite, the other lost to a poacher's snare. The pride was vulnerable. And on the savannah, vulnerability is a scented invitation to invasion. From the south, a new coalition had entered the territory. They were called the Black Manes. 5 brothers, young, surging with testosterone and hungry for land. They didn't just want territory. They wanted a massacre. The Black Manes began a campaign of terror against the marauder females. They would cross the river at night, roaring their challenges, marking the trees with their scent. They were testing the defenses, finding the cracks. The marauder lionesses, the same ones who had abandoned Casper, were exhausted. They had cubs to protect new litters, tawny and perfect, but they were failing. The game was scarce, and the constant pressure from the invaders meant they couldn't hunt effectively. The air around the Limpopo smelled of impending doom. It was only a matter of time before the Black Manes launched their final assault to execute Titan and kill every cub in the pride to spur the females back into heat. It was into this cauldron of tension that the ghost returned. Casper didn't know about the politics. He didn't know about the Black Manes. He only knew the scent of the river water. He remembered the specific geometry of the leadwood trees. He remembered the smell of the pride that had left him to die. Lions have distinct roar patterns. A son can recognize the roar of his father miles away, even years later. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and bruise black, Casper stopped. He lifted his massive white head, tasting the breeze. He smelled it. The scent of Titan. But it was weak. It smelled of decay and old age. And underneath it, he smelled something else. The sharp, metallic tang of fresh blood and the musk of strange males. Casper stood on a ridge overlooking the valley of his birth. Below him, the golden grass swayed in the wind. To any other creature, this was a warning to turn back. Entering a war zone between 2 coalitions is suicide for a solitary male. But Casper wasn't just a male, he was a survivor of the impossible. He had walked through the valley of death and built a home there. He let out a sound that had not been heard in this valley for 3 years. Not a roar. Not yet. It was a contact call, a deep, guttural moan that vibrated through the ground. Who is the king of this valley? The sound rolled down the ridge, over the river, and into the ears of the Black Manes patrolling the border. 5 heads snapped up, 5 pairs of eyes narrowed. They had never heard a call like this. It was too deep for a young nomad, too confident for an old wanderer. They turned toward the ridge. They saw a white speck against the darkening sky, a ghost standing on the edge of the world. Casper watched them turn. He saw the 5 dark silhouettes. He didn't flinch. He didn't retreat. He began to walk down the slope. The Ghost King had come home, and he wasn't looking for a reunion. He was looking for a war. The walk of a king is different from the walk of a survivor. A survivor moves to avoid attention. A king moves to command it. As Casper descended the ridge, he didn't crouch. He didn't use the termite mounds for cover. He walked down the center of the game trail, his massive white shoulders rolling with the hydraulic precision of a machine built for war. Below him, the 5 black manes watched. In the animal kingdom, confusion is dangerous. Predators operate on recognition patterns. If it runs, chase it. If it roars, assess it. If it stands its ground, fear it. But they had never seen a ghost before. The lead male of the Black Mane Coalition, a brute with a scarred nose and a mane so dark it looked like spilled ink, stepped forward. He let out a chuff, a sharp exhale of air. It was a question. "What are you?" Casper didn't answer. He kept walking. The distance closed. 200 yards, 150. The air in the valley seemed to vanish, sucked into the vacuum of the impending violence. The birds fell silent. Even the wind died down, as if the savanna itself was holding its breath. Behind the black manes, huddled near the riverbank, were the remnants of the marauder pride. Titan, the old king, stood on trembling legs. He was a shadow of the tyrant who had once ruled this land. His ribs heaved with every breath. He watched the white shape approaching, his yellow eyes wide. Did he recognize the son he had cast out? Or did he simply see an angel of death coming to finish what nature started? Casper stopped 30 yards from the coalition. He looked at the 5 males. Then he looked past them, locking eyes with Titan. For a fleeting second, the history of the rejection hung between them. The hunger, the cold nights, the hyenas, the solitude. Then Casper turned his gaze back to the black mane leader, and he roared. This was not the high-pitched yowl of a cub. This was a sonic boom. It started deep in his chest, a rumble that shook the leaves of the acacia trees and erupted into a thunderclap that could be heard 5 miles away. It was a declaration of ownership. I am not a guest here. I am the landlord. The black mane leader, driven by instinct and testosterone, couldn't let the challenge stand. He roared back and charged. A fight between lions is not a choreographed movie scene. It is a car crash. It is fast, dirty, and blindingly violent. The leader hit Casper with the force of a battering ram. Dust exploded into a cloud, obscuring the vision of the onlookers. Within the cloud, there was the wet sound of tearing flesh and the sickening crunch of bone meeting bone. Usually, a 5-on-1 fight ends in seconds with the solitary male being disemboweled. But the black manes made a fatal error. They hesitated. The sight of the white lion, glowing in the twilight, fighting with a ferocity that bordered on madness, paused them. They waited to see if their leader would pin him. That hesitation cost them the war. Casper didn't fight to pin, he fought to maim. He used the restless strength he had built, dragging buffalo carcasses alone. He twisted under the black mane's guard, burying his teeth into the sensitive armpit of the attacker, the kill spot where the artery runs close to the surface. He bit down and ripped. The black mane leader screamed a sound that turned into a gurgle. Blood, bright and arterial, sprayed across Casper's white face, painting him in a horrific mask of crimson. Casper shoved the wounded male aside and turned to the other 4. He was covered in blood. He was roaring. He looked like a demon rising from the earth. The psychological dam broke. The remaining 4 black manes looked at their fallen leader, writhing in the dust. They looked at the white monster who was already stepping forward for the next kill, and they ran. Fear is contagious. Once the line broke, the coalition dissolved. They scattered into the bush, abandoning their conquest, abandoning their territory, fleeing the ghost that could not be killed. Casper didn't chase them. A king doesn't chase. He stood over the dying leader, his chest heaving. The white coat that had been his curse was now his banner. It was stained with the blood of his enemies, a terrifying tapestry of his victory. He turned to the riverbank, to the marauder pride. The lionesses were frozen. Among them stood his mother. She was older now, her face graying, her body scarred by the years of survival. She watched him approach. She didn't run. Perhaps she knew it was useless. Perhaps she knew that if he wanted them dead, they were already dead. Casper walked up to Titan. The old male lowered his head. It was the ultimate sign of submission. He was surrendering his crown. He expected the killing bite, the coup de grace that new kings deliver to the old. Casper stood over his father. He smelled the weakness. He remembered the rejection. But Casper did not bite. He sniffed Titan's ear, a rough, dismissive gesture. Then he walked past him. Killing the old man was unnecessary. Titan was already a ghost. By letting him live, Casper was inflicting a punishment worse than death, irrelevance. Titan would live out his remaining days watching the son he rejected rule the empire he couldn't protect. Casper moved to the center of the pride. He lay down in the dust, right in the middle of the lionesses. He closed his eyes. Slowly, tentatively, one of the females approached. She sniffed his blood-soaked flank. Then she began to lick him. Then another, and another. They were cleaning him. They were accepting him. Not out of love, but out of the pragmatic laws of the wild. He was the strongest. He was the protector. He was the king. And just like that, the loop was closed. The cub, who had been abandoned to the hyenas because he was too visible, was now surrounded by the very pride that had left him, safe because of his visibility. His white coat was no longer a target. It was a warning flag to the rest of the savannah. Do not come here. The ghost lives here. In the months that followed, the legend of the Ghost King spread. Tourists flocked to the reserve, desperate for a glimpse of the white lion of the Limpopo. They took photos of him sleeping in the sun, his massive paws draped over a termite mound, his mane blowing in the wind. They saw a beautiful animal, but they didn't see the truth. They didn't see the cold nights shivering in a tree. They didn't see the hunger. They didn't see the moment his mother turned her back. Casper ruled for 6 years. He sired cubs, some white, some tawny, and he defended them with a savagery that became folklore among the rangers. He never lost a fight. He never backed down. And when he finally died, many years later, not from the jaws of a rival but from the natural closing of time, they say the savannah was unusually quiet. His story teaches us a brutal, beautiful truth about existence. We are often told that to survive, we must fit in, we must blend with the grass, we must look like the others, walk like the others, and sound like the others. But nature shows us a different path. Casper was given a death sentence at birth. The world told him he was wrong. The world told him he was broken. But he didn't try to paint himself brown. He didn't try to hide who he was. He took the very thing that made him different, the thing that made him a target, and he sharpened it into a weapon. He showed us that sometimes the things that isolate us are the things that make us powerful, that being an outcast is just a training ground for being a king. So, the next time you feel like you don't fit in, remember the white lion of the Limpopo. Remember the ghost. And remember that in a world of golden grass, it is better to be the one who stands out than the one who is never seen at all. This is the story of the Ghost King. If this story moved you, If you felt the cold of the night and the heat of the battle, hit that subscribe button. We have more stories from the dark heart of the wild coming soon. Until next time, keep your eyes on the shadows. You never know what's watching you back.